And welcome back to me, folks. And look who my special guest is. It is none other than Belinda Carahalios, the co-founder of the New Blue Party of Ontario. And here's the story, folks. About an hour ago, Belinda Carahalios was in Queen's Park. She sits now as an independent MPP, one of many under the Doug Ford regime, because if it's not his way, it's the highway, apparently. And then she was, well, Belinda, I'll let you tell the story in your own words, because something happened. You were supposed to still be in the House right now. Why are you here?
Well, it started, I guess, November 19th. I got COVID-19. And the reason why that was detected is because the Speaker of the House has implemented rules. Okay. And those rules are you either need to show proof of full vaccination against COVID-19 or show proof of a negative rapid test.
Okay.
And I won't play the game. I'm not disclosing my vaccination status. So I take the test. And so I tested positive, unfortunately, and had to quarantine. Now, public health relieved me of my quarantine as of November the 29th, or November 30th, pardon me. I sent that letter to the legislature, and the Speaker of the House had said that I'm not allowed back in for 90 days. And his reasoning was that public health says that you cannot test within the 90 days after testing positive and recovering from COVID-19. And speaking with a public health nurse, she had said that their rules should trump my employer's rules. I should not have to prove proof of negative test.
Oh, interesting.
So I went into the legislature today. I had a question, and the Speaker of the House, Ted Arnott, the MPP for Wellington Halton Hills, asked me to leave because he said that I was in contempt.
Well, and by the way, just in case we might get into any kind of trouble, have we moved away from YouTube yet, Mr. Producer? We are safe. Yes, so folks, Rumble, Odyssey, and Super U, if you want to see the full interview, because the censorious thugs of Silicon Valley don't like what people like myself and Belinda Carahalios and Sheila Gunn Reid have to say. So, Belinda, first of all, you weren't permitted to give your question in the House today. What was it going to be?
It was going to be about the monoclonal antibody therapy. So it's a therapy that's available in Ontario, but in one location. So right now, St. Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton is providing that treatment. Many physicians, many Ontarians don't even know about it. It's covered by OHIP. Nobody's talking about it, including the Ford PC government.
I'm just wondering, Belinda, this 90-day prohibition that they're basing your expulsion from Queen's Park on, is there something more nefarious at play here, i.e., it's not that they really fear you as a modern-day version of Typhoid Mary, but maybe they don't want you and others like you asking, shall we call it, impolite questions about the pandemic?
Well, I'm one of few. Like as you mentioned, there's a couple of independent members, and on our side, we do ask challenging questions. It's myself, MPP Nicholls, MPP Baber. You know, we're asking questions about the way the government is handling things. I do go a step further. I am asking about things outside of the pandemic because, let's face it, the Ford PC government has gone hard left on everything, not just COVID-19 policies and rules and mandates. And yeah, they don't like it. And you know, keep in mind, the Speaker of the House is a member of the PC party.
100%, a former colleague of yours, right? Belinda, going into the House, knowing what you knew a few hours ago when you first entered Queen's Park, did you expect this to happen, or did you think they're going to be civil, they're going to abide by democratic procedures, surely they're not going to frog march an elected MPP out of the legislature? What were your thoughts when you saw those security guards come up to you and give you the bum's rush?
So I was very careful. I followed the rules. So his rules were proof of negative antigen or proof of vaccination. I took a rapid test last night. I did everything I was supposed to do. I went in, I showed it to security, they allowed me into the building, and then I was allowed into the chamber, but as soon as I took my seat, the Speaker called me out. And I said to him, and we will get a video clip of that from the legislature, that I followed your rules.
Yeah.
And it wasn't good enough for him. So public health's rules, which says I don't need a test, wasn't good enough for him. His own rules, saying that a negative test is required, wasn't good enough for him.
Unbelievable. You know, I look upon this as basically police state bully boy tactics. And I experienced it myself. As you know, 2 months ago, myself and a cameraman, we went into Queen's Park. We got the test done the night before. We were both negative. We got through security. And it was to cover a press briefing in the media room with Dr. Charles McVitie. And the CTV reporter sick security on us that since we're not members of the Queen's Park Parliamentary Press Club, we have no right being there, even though we were invited there by MPP Rick Nicholls, another Conservative now sitting as an independent. So they don't like journalists asking impolite questions. They don't even like people who are elected representatives asking impolite questions. Like I said, Belinda, am I exaggerating by saying that this so-called democracy we have in Ontario under these emergency orders resembles more of something like a police state?
Well, it started even July 2020, this lack of democracy. And, you know, they did that Bill 195, the Reopening Ontario Act. That's when I first got kicked out of the PC party. I'm now with the New Blue Party of Ontario. And, you know, that bill allows the Ford government to just make up rules without debate, without vote. That's an affront to democracy. What Ted Arnott did today, the Speaker of the House, is the same thing. He is silencing me and all of the people that I represent in the riding of Cambridge. Like, I'm not a bureaucrat. I'm not just an employee of the legislature. Yeah. I am an elected representative.
You know, that's a very important point you bring up. And before I get on to my follow-up question there, folks, if we've got Belinda live right here. She's a true freedom fighter. If you have any questions that you have for her, please submit them, and Belinda will try as best she can to answer them. What I'd like to follow up on what you just told me, Ted Arnott, the Speaker, raised this, that you shouldn't be there. Are you saying, Belinda, if Ted didn't make this an issue, if he kept his mouth shut, looked the other way, turned the other cheek, you're still sitting in the House? Yeah,
exactly. Had he not said anything, I could have asked my question today, voted. There was a vote after a question period today. I could have done my job, but he was very clear he wanted me out. He warned me, and he named and shamed me, and I was walked out of the legislature.
Now, here's the question to that then. Is this Ted Arnott acting organically, that maybe he has a vendetta against you, he's a stickler to the rules, whatever, or is there somebody pulling his strings? Is there someone in the party and the government that said, if that Belinda Carvalho shows up, you know what to do, Ted?
Well, I mean, I don't know what conversations he's having behind closed doors. I'd like to think that he is trying to act in what he believes is the best thing, but you know, you can't claim to follow the science and then ignore it.
Yes.
It's one or the other. You're either following science or you're not.
It's baffling. I'm going to reach out, by the way, to my colleague, Sheila Gunn Reid. She's in Alberta right now. Sheila, do you have any questions for Belinda Carvalho?
Belinda, I want to ask you, what are you hearing from your own constituents about your treatment in the legislature? Because it would seem as though, while this is an attack on you and your medical privacy, it also is a form of disenfranchisement of them, that their votes for you don't matter and they don't get a voice in the legislature.
Yeah, my constituents are frustrated, many of them. You know, it's for a number of reasons, going back to July 2020. I would even say before that, when we saw that the Ford PC government initially starting to make that left-hand turn into traffic. And, you know, so they were feeling abandoned by the PC party. I got kicked out. That was a blessing in disguise, like I said, because now we have a new party, the New Blue Party of Ontario, and they are frustrated again because the Speaker is saying that I cannot do the job that they've elected me to do.
Indeed. And, you know, Belinda, what is going on with Premier Doug Ford? I mean, you're going back to July 2020. I'm just going back to July 2021 when he said, absolutely no way there's going to be a vaccine passport for Ontario. I'm paraphrasing here, but he didn't want a two-tier class of citizenship. He didn't want, you know, apartheid 2.0 in Ontario. And then the very next month, he said, guess what? Mandatory vaccine passport. I remember on August 19th, Rick Nicholls, he was given that 5 p.m. deadline, get jabbed to reveal your medical status or, you know, get out of the caucus. And sure enough, Rick Nicholls is also an independent too. You know, for a man that ran in 2018 with the slogans, for the people, and Ontario open for business, although, mind you, business has never been better, I understand, at deco labels, you know, with all those stickers telling you how to navigate your way through the store so the COVID cooties don't get you. What happened to Doug Ford Classic?
Well, you know, we can even look as far back as the leadership. This is a man that when he was asked by a reporter, you know, which religion he is, he said, I'm whatever you want me to be. If you can't even commit to your belief system, like, how, do you even, what do you believe in at all? Like, how do we know what this man even stands for? Like, he's flip-flopped on everything. No vaccine passport, then he implements it. I don't want to do the mandatory masks, he does it. I don't want a regional approach, he does a regional approach. I mean, the list goes on and on.
You know, Belinda, that anecdote reminds me of a whopper when Paul Martin was Prime Minister. And it was around this time of year, Christmas time, and it was a press opportunity. And he was outside his house, and he was putting a wreath on the door. And I think it was a CBC reporter asked him, it wasn't a gotcha question, it was just like a playful question. And she said, Mr. Prime Minister, is that a Christmas wreath or a holiday wreath? And Paul Martin had this look on his face, folks. It was like Bambi being blinded by the high beams of a Hummer on the 401. And he said, it's a $50 wreath. And that was another part of the narrative that gave him the nickname that you can never come back from, which was Mr. Dithers. A leader is not a dithering idiot. A leader, you know, and I see the same thing with Ford. I call him flip-flop Ford. He's flip-flopped on so many things. And, you know, I even go back to before the election, Tanya Granick-Allen was the kingmaker for Ford. Without her support, it's probably Christine Elliott, who is the premier today. And then tweets surfaced on social media from 10 years ago. And Tanya Granick-Allen, like that, was thrown under the bus. So I thought that was ominous, you know, even before he became the premier. Who is pulling the strings? I mean, what is, because I can't, one thing we've learned, Belinda, is that Doug is not Rob. And I'm speaking of Rob Ford, the late, great, departed former mayor of Toronto. I think people had the perception they were interchangeable. I don't think that's so.
I actually made a statement about that a few weeks ago, and I said, like, you know, Ford Nation was Rob Ford, God rest his soul. It's not Doug. Doug is not Rob. And, you know, the most frustrating thing is, and you alluded to it, a leader takes a stand. Yeah. A leader takes risks. Yeah. A leader stands up for the people. He's done none of those things. He's just passing the buck. Oh, well, the chief medical officer of health said this. Well, the minister of health says this. Like, you're the premier. Do something.
You know, Belinda, well said. I can't tell you how much frustration I've seen looking at pressers with Doug Ford, by the way, which we're not allowed to attend. Once upon a time, he showed up to Rebel Live events. He proposed in 2017 a weekly show here at Rebel News. But that's how quickly things change. I mean, I think Doug Ford can do gymnastic somersaults that would make Nadia Comaneci red with envy. But I've already gone off on a tangerine to forget, and I'm forgetting my original
David,
question.
I've got a question.
Sheila's got a question? Okay, thanks for bailing me out, Sheila.
Yeah, no, I saw that you were struggling. I have a question, Belinda. Have any of your colleagues in the legislature reached out to you today and expressed dismay? Like, I think that a normal person seeing you frog marched out would say, that's a bit much. Are any of the MPPs reaching out to you, to even behind the scenes? You don't have to name names, but have any of them bothered to reach out to you?
Honestly, it was just Rick Nicholls. He sent a text saying, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm fine, I'm all right, because I am fine, I am all right. I was, you know, I want to represent the people of Cambridge. I followed the rules, I tried to. I was barred from doing so, and apparently will continue to be barred for the next 90 days. But it was just Rick.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me how human decency is falling by the wayside, that people can see what happened to you and think, you know what, I better shut up for partisanship's sake. It's remarkable to see it happen in real time.
I agree.
And you know, Sheila, speaking of Rick Nicholls, I mean, in the short time I've known Rick Nicholls, Belinda, I have found him to be such a decent, honorable, classy person. But I want to move beyond that to you and your husband, Jim Karahalios. You formed the New Blue Party. And Rick Nicholls, he's an independent MPP. Randy Hillier, an independent MPP. Roman Baber, independent MPP. All of you coming from the PC party of Ontario. And yet it seems that people are going to run independently or run under a new party banner. What I got to tell you, I find it frustrating that why can't you all come together? Because if there's 4, 5, 6 MPPs, now you've got some critical mass, right? Now you're not just a one MPP party. You're obviously on the same ideological side, more or less, when it comes to the pandemic and the lockdowns and the vaccine passports. So I think there is a meeting of the minds here. Why can't you all come together and be one opposition party?
Yeah, I mean, the door is always open, right? I know that Rick has said publicly that he's not going to run again, okay. And we said that's fine. You can join. So I'm not going to speak on behalf of Roman or Rick, but the door is open. And the New Blue Party, we have membership portal is open. Like, we've got everything. Like, the machine is up and running. So it's very easy at this point for them to just say, okay, yeah, like, let me come on board. As long as they're okay with our Constitution and our statement of principles, then great.
See, I would imagine they are. So the question arises, Belinda, is this ego driving this? Is that everybody wants to be the head honcho of a startup political party? I mean, as they used to say when they were recording those Ethiopian famine songs, there'd be a sign for all these artists coming in saying, check your ego at the door. Is that what's behind this? Because ideologically, like I said earlier, it seems that you're all on the same page.
I don't know if it's ego, really and truly. I don't want to say that because that might not be the case. It just, Jim and I started the New Blue Party. It is not just a one-trick pony. It's not an anti-COVID pandemic type thing. It goes so much further than that. We're actually looking at policies across the spectrum, and we want people to understand that we're a real party with actual policy platform, and it's an option for the next election, and these other independent members are aware of that, and the ball at this point is in their court.
And Belinda, when it comes to the very near future, you say going back maybe to Queen's Park, is that on the table, or as you said earlier, you pass through security with flying colors to get into the House today. Now maybe is there a red flag that if that Belinda gal shows up, don't let her in?
So the House is sitting today, tomorrow, and Thursday.
Okay.
If I had tried to attend to go again, I am sure I will not be allowed into the building as per what happened today. And then we resume again February 22nd, which should be fine because at that point I'm 90 days post positive COVID test.
Wow, February 22nd. That's one hell of a Christmas break.
It's a long break. I mean, it's good because
I thought we were in a pandemic. I thought this was an emergency. By the way, where will the likes of the former finance minister be vacationing while he plays prefab videos of him in Ajax next to the fireplace? But I won't get in there. Sheila, do you have any other questions for Belinda, or do we have some comments and questions from our viewers?
We do have some questions from our viewers. Noble Canadian asked Belinda, if the New Blue Party wins the next election, will you repeal the Reopening Ontario Act and start investigations of the former government for charter violations?
So the Reopening Ontario Act has a sunset clause. So it's supposed to die within 2 years of it being passed. So that would be July 21st of 2022 anyway. Now, I don't believe anything that the PC government says, to be quite honest with you, sorry. But the Motion 8, which was debated in November when I was barred from the legislature, that extended the powers of the Reopening Ontario Act until the March 28th of next year, I believe, in which case it needs to be debated and voted on again to get another extension. But remember, in May, the writ is going to drop because we have an election, so that bill should die. But the New Blue Party has been very clear that we are not in support of the Reopening Ontario Act. That if something is as important as COVID-19, a pandemic, you should have your elected representatives at the Ontario Legislature debating and flushing these things out and voting on it. It is very, very important. Democracy is very precious, and there is nothing that should supersede that.
if I might just add in, I just love the Orwellian overtones of that, the Reopening Ontario Act, which is all about closing down and locking down Ontario. It's right out of 1984. The one place you don't want to go to in that dystopian future world is the Ministry of Love, because that's where they torture you to death. Anyway, carry on, Sheila.
Sure. We've got a couple of different questions about this same topic, so I'll bundle them all into one and thank everybody for sending us the messages on the same issue. But they would like you, several people would like you to address some tensions between yourself and Jim Karahalios and Randy Hillier, the other renegade MP in the legislature.
Yeah, so Randy hasn't shown up to the legislature. That's public news. There hasn't been, he has voted twice in the last year. It's just peculiar to me that when we get paid as members of provincial parliament to do our constituency work, but also to do the legislative side of things, which is, going through the bills and debating them and looking at how things can, voting against them or for them, he hasn't done any of that. And I think that's a huge part of the role as an MPP. So there's a little bit of suspicion around that. Jim could speak to more of this, of course, because there's conversations that he's had, and I don't want to get into that. But now you have this other part where we have our party. It's all ready to go. It's going. It's not ready to go. It's going. The candidate application portal is opening this week, and Randy is still at home. If you want to be an advocate, or you want to be someone who does rallies, do that. But if you're going to be an MPP, you have a job to do. And yeah, he doesn't like the masking and the proof of testing. That's a small sacrifice to pay to represent your constituents.
Well, I was going to ask you, Belinda, what do you think Randy's unspoken strategy is here? Is it merely that he just knows if he does show up at Queen's Park, he's going to get the same treatment you got an hour and a half ago?
If he can show a negative test and if he's willing to put on a mask, they're both very annoying things to do. It's more hoops to jump through just to do the job. But that's what we're getting paid to do.
Okay.
And these are things that what's that small sacrifice to be able to properly represent and properly debate and go through these horrible pieces of legislation that the Ford government's putting through, and to vote against it. It's one extra vote, motion 8. I couldn't go. I was barred from the legislature because I had COVID-19. Where was he? Why couldn't he vote against that?
Interesting. Sheila?
Oh, and just to be clear, we've reached out to Randy several times just to get his side of the story. That's what we do. We give Belinda a chance to talk. We want to hear from Randy too, and we've had some difficulty as of late making that connection. The next chat comes from Becca Henderson, talking about an issue that has plagued Alberta for a while. She gives us a buck and says, is there any hope that New Blue and Ontario First Party can make an alliance? Was there any discussion between the independents about having one party? Becca's scared of a true conservative vote split.
So the Ontario First Party isn't even registered yet, so there's no party yet. And like I had mentioned to David before, the New Blue Party has been up and running for quite some time. We have Elections Ontario is saying we have 55 constituency associations. It's actually closer to 100. We just have a few more ridings that we need to fill. We have people who have already expressed interest. At this point, there is really no need for another provincial party. When I first got kicked out in July 2020, people were saying, because Jim had run federally in the leadership and got kicked out, and people were saying, why don't you start a federal party? And we thought, well, why would we do that? There's the PPC. Why would we try to split that vote further? No, we need a real conservative option in Ontario. So we put all of our resources, our time, and we started the New Blue Party of Ontario, and it's taken off. And so I would put that same question to Randy. Why would you start another provincial party when there is a real conservative option already available now in Ontario?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery. And Belinda, if I may say, whatever the party is and whoever the person is behind it, that a political startup party, it is a Herculean task to win even a single seat. Look at the PPC that you just mentioned. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Maxime Bernier, and I thought he did tremendously well in terms of a percentage of the vote, but even in his own home riding of Beauce, Quebec, he could not win a seat that has been in his family for decades, sadly, I would say. So given the history is against you in terms of being part of a startup party, isn't that further impetus for everyone to bury the hatchet, if there are hatchets, and get on side? And like I said before, have some traction with a group of elected MPPs instead of just one.
Yeah, it would make things a lot easier. Like Jim and I know that it is going to be a challenge the next election, obviously. Doesn't mean we're going to work any less. We're working so hard. We've got a great executive. We've got a lot of volunteers. It's a lot of work, and there's a lot of building to get to the point that we're at. We're 6 months to an election.
Yeah.
Who's starting a new party now?
It's baffling. Sheila, I believe we have a couple more comments left for Belinda.
We do. I think we have one more comment left for Belinda, and then I have to sign off because I have another interview scheduled, but I could stay and talk to Belinda all day. The next question for Belinda is from Joyful from the Heart. She asks, Belinda, thanks for coming by. If you don't mind me asking, were you actually sick, or did you have symptoms of COVID? The PCR is not reliable from what I hear.
Thanks for the question. So I have to test, like I had said earlier, I have to test with a rapid test. Every time I go to the legislature, it's good for 48 hours. So I had tested the Sunday of the week of the 17th that week, and it was negative. I went to the legislature Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday night, I went back to my pharmacy to get tested again because I had a question on the Thursday, and it came back positive, which was very peculiar to both me and the pharmacist because I was feeling fine. So we tested again, and it came back positive again. This is the rapid test, the one that just kind of goes up to here. And at that point, he said, well, you've tested positive twice. I'm surprised, as was I. And so I had to go get a PCR test at that point because they do report to public health. So I got the PCR on Friday, and the funny thing was, as the nurse was administering the test, she said, oh, I'm sure it's negative. Because again, I wasn't exhibiting any symptoms. I had back pain, but that was it. It came back positive. And so, I was fine. I was a little tired. I didn't have congestion, but I did lose my sense of smell and my sense of taste. But that was it. And I realize I'm lucky not everyone has the same reaction, but it was very mild for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we got one last one, and then I'll go.
I think two, Sheila.
No, we've got just one so far showing up on here. Burbinski asks, why haven't you folks addressed Canadian citizens being denied access to food? New Brunswick gave power to stores to deny access unless vaxxed. I'm not sure if this is a question for Belinda as much as it is for all of us on the panel here, but I know that we have addressed the utter segregation of all of this. I mean, it's one thing to deny people access to transportation, but to deny people food, I suppose that was always the next step, because when you allow a little bit of this to happen, it just goes on and on and on. And then all of a sudden, Belinda's getting thrown out on her ear from the legislature.
You know what? That is a shocking thing. That was late last week. The New Brunswick government
Friday.
gave grocers the option to turn down people. I don't know if there's a single supermarket or grocery store that has actually embraced that, but my goodness, that is scary. Is there any more basic human right than the right to purchase food? Because if you don't get food, you die.
Yeah. It's disgusting. When I read that, I was shocked. It's that same pass the buck mentality where the province is saying, "Oh, we're not doing it.
Yes.
We're not the bad guys, but we're going to let you guys do it on the side." Like it just. I'm happy to hear that no grocers have implemented it. But myself, the New Blue Party, we've been very vocal about you shouldn't be denying people access to anything based on vaccination status.
Yeah.
And this vaccine has not done what it was promised of us. It hasn't done what it was it's reducing severity, but people are still catching COVID.
Correct.
People are still transmitting it.
Yep.
People are still winding up in the hospital. So this vaccine passport, not working.
I agree totally, Belinda. Sheila, one last comment, I believe?
Yeah, we do have one last one, and I was just going to add to that. To deny people access to the building that houses our democracies, it's the same thing. It's a basic fundamental human right, and it happened to Belinda today. Shauna Marie gives us a buck and says, thank you for your transparency regarding Mr. Hillier. It's important to hear both sides.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, whenever I come across Mr. Hillier at a Freedom rally, Belinda, he's got all the time in the world for us. And he is a great interview. He's very colorful. He doesn't mince words. But I guess building on that comment that just came in, the election is months away, June 2nd, I believe. So maybe is there an opportunity for bridges to be mended?
Well, I mean, I'm an eternal optimist. I like to think so. But I mean, at this point, he's trying to start a party. He's been speaking ill about both me and Jim publicly. I mean, at this point, you know, I think he's made his decision, and I'm gonna let him stay with that decision.
Fair enough. Well, Belinda, before we sign off, I didn't ask you, I think, the most important question of all. How are you feeling? I mean, you look great. And for all you feminists out there, don't worry, this is not a Me Too moment or anything like that. You look fantastic.
I will agree. She looks great.
Thank you, Sheila. Are you healthy right now? Do you have any more symptoms, or is that all in the past?
Oh, I feel great, honestly.
Great.
It did not last long. I'm asthmatic. I've said that many times. I was a little scared that it would affect my respiratory system. I was okay. And I am still okay, and I just wish I could get to Queen's Park and give them, you know what.
100%. But you know what, Belinda, never take your eye off the main prize, which is, I know it's cliche, without your health, you're nothing. You've got a little one, you're a new mother. That's so important. These are the real important issues, not all this political theater stuff that we're going through. But having said that, and I guess I speak for Sheila, you know, folks, I never thought I'd see the day elected representatives frog marched out by security for really not being a contagion of any kind of disease, but for professing wrongthink. Sheila, what's your closing remarks on what happened to Belinda Carahalios today?
Yeah, it's weird to see it happen to a politician for once. Normally it just happens to us journalists.
Yes, that's right. That is so true. Well, as the saying goes, misery loves company,
It's so
Belinda.
true.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, listen, Belinda, you keep fighting for freedom, and your husband, Jim, who I have a lot of respect for. And folks, that wraps up the show. We're so grateful that Belinda changed her schedule to come in here live and in person on this breaking news. Sheila and I will be back here on Thursday.